I mean, Israel's just a crafty mother. Like, I don't get me wrong, like, we all know he does steroids, and that probably helps his performance. We all seen him fight with the that hung down. I mean, have you ever seen a man fight in the UFC with Gyno from weed? I mean, look at Nate Diaz. If that was the case, Nate Diaz would have down to his knees.
What's up, guys? Derek, moreplaysmartates.com. Today we're going to be talking about Israel Adesanya and his fluctuating gynecomastia. This is a guy who is seemingly always in the news for, what was it called? Tittygate, Gynogate. I don't know. It was like the conspiracy around his gyno. So as you know, or may not know, he showed up to the Paulo Costa fight with pretty absurd unilateral gyno development, to a point where it was kind of ironic because Costa is the one who was seen as, you know, the juice freak, you know, the guy who was sauced to the fucking tits and the guy who had a physique that was just impossible to get without gear. And Adesanya would harp on him during the pre-fight, you know, antics and you know, shit talking and whatnot, talking about how he's gonna get popped by USADA someday and he's on gear and blah blah blah. And then Adesanya shows up with absurd fucking gyno. Like, this is night and day between what he had before, because he's been in the league for a minute. It's not like he's a brand new fighter. To just show up with the manifestation of like significant glandular development out of nowhere obviously brought a lot of speculation to the table and led to some pretty awkward post-fight interview scenarios where he basically had to shrug off his, you know, people asking about his tit. He's like, why are people looking at my tits? Like, what's going on, bro? That was like the best answer he had in like the press conferences and whatnot. And he did a pretty half-assed interview as well, where he talked about his, you know, doctor's interpretation, which showed no actual blood work or biomarkers or any sort of representation of what was going on, which we've dissected multiple times on this channel at this point. And this is why people always defer to me when it comes up, because I've covered it pretty extensively. Reason being, UFC, doping, overlap of endocrinology, gyno. It's like the fucking holy trinity or quadrinity of more plates, more dates shit. So anyways, in this interview, I got notice that Strickland ends up talking about Adesanya. This is the you know, predictions for UFC 271. It's going to be Whitaker versus Adesanya 2. Let me know, by the way, what you guys think in the comments down below for your predictions, as well as the commentary from some of the UFC fighters on Adesanya, which in particular is, you know, the guy is prepping for his fight, and some of the pictures coming out of his camp, you can see the gyno again. So let's see what Strickland has to say.
I saw you tell the Schmo that you think in the rematch between Israel and Robert that Israel will beat Robert, but how do you think he'll beat Robert in that rematch?
I mean, Israel's just a crafty motherfucker. Like, I don't get me wrong, like, we all know he does steroids, and that probably helps his performance. We all seen him fight with the titty that hung down. I mean, have you ever seen a man fight in the UFC with gyno from weed? I mean, look at Nate Diaz. If that was the case, Nate Diaz would have tits down to his knees. Get out of here with this. So anyways.
Okay, so is it fair to lump somebody's drug response into a category that everyone responds the same? Obviously not. However, I have done some deep dives on the weed causing gyno debate and just Adesanya's case in general. And if you haven't seen my stuff, go to my channel, sort by Israel Adesanya, and you can see the literally the first video, suddenly develops gyno from steroid use, gynecomastia science explained. As you can see here, it was god damn it, I just clicked the video by accident. I was trying to bring up the thumbnail. So as you can see here, pretty substantial difference. UFC 248, flat as a pancake. UFC 253, such significant protrusion only on one side, completely asymmetrical. And, you know, this is not normal, especially for an individual who's a chronic weed smoker for years on end. This is not something that just comes out of nowhere. So again, this is sort by Israel Adesanya. You can see the initial video as well as the follow-ups, where even here he explains what caused his gyno in an interview with Ariel Hawani. Here is the times he's reversed his gyno and like what happened, because there are, since then he's shown up multiple times with like reasonable looking, less protruding gynecomastia, and it kind of flares up and down seemingly, like UFC 253 to 259, seemingly a lot better. You can see the difference here. It's not as protruding to a point where before, even with full wingspan spread, he is got a big fucking handful of titty there. Whereas here, not so much. And I explain why and exactly what happened in those videos. That's sort of what we're going to get into too. And by the way, if you haven't seen my video on the true cause of gyno, where I react to a clip of Andrew Huberman and Joe Rogan talking about the manifestation of gynecomastia, it's definitely worth a watch to understand how it develops in the first place. In addition to that, the video me and Andrew Huberman did on a podcast on my channel, a clip from it, we talked about gyno in the UFC and how cannabis actually affects hormone levels. I would definitely recommend checking that out, because in that video we touch on UFC fighters specifically, PED use, hormone imbalances, androgen deficiency as a result of exogenous hormone use as well for synthetics, and how it could cause gyno development, numerous different things. And it's obviously great to get insight from somebody as credentialed as Andrew, especially seeing as I just reacted to his clip too on the Joe Rogan podcast there. I think you can see more of the videos here where I kind of I think I've dissected it pretty fucking thoroughly at this point, where I could not possibly give more further commentary on the manifestation of it and what is causing it and whatnot. So anyways, you can check that out for the discussion on the gyno, the weed, the steroids, the fucking everything. But getting into the actual opinions and commentary from UFC fighters and veterans too. We have Bisping coming up too. I just spit on the goddamn lens, but it's fine. Who's going to be telling us about Adesanya's gyno too. But here, let's continue with Strickland. Hear what he has to say.
Back to him and Whitaker. Izzy's a great striker. He comes from a steroid background of kickboxing. I think he's going to starch Whitaker because he's a great fighter, and that's the fight I want.
I think it's a really, really good fight.
That was fucking funny. I wasn't expecting that.
I'm all in believing that you can rebuild and become a better fighter and grow. So Bobby Knuckles versus Adesanya, and it may not be the same result, maybe the same outcome as far as like Adesanya winning, but I think it should be a better fight this time around. You know what I mean? But I think
Adesanya's going to win personally, but the guy's just such a fucking technical sniper, dude. Like the way he dismantled Costa, absurd. Fucking absurd. And he seems to be, I don't know, I just don't think he's challenged enough in the middleweight division. But anyways, let's hear what, in this podcast, we have Bisping, Calvin Kattar, who's ranked number 5 in the featherweight division, as well as Anthony Smith, who's ranked number 4 in the light heavyweight division. Talk about the Adesanya gyno situation.
Hamilton Jazz, there it is.
There we go. Yeah, so you can see.
So this is the UFC subreddit, dude. Let's see. It's Izzy is growing a titty again in all caps.
There we go. Yeah, so you can see the droop there noticeably on his right-hand side.
It's always about this time that he's about to fight, too. I wonder if it's I don't know. It's always right before he fights. It's the weirdest thing. I don't know if it's just a weight cut thing or I don't know what it is. It's weird.
My question is, and I am automatically inclined to give him the benefit of the doubt. You know what I mean? And I don't know how you feel, but in this day and age, such a high-profile fight with USADA, right? I just don't see it. And certainly, what the fuck is he taking that only affects his right breast?
Okay, so hang on.
I mean, if they were causing your tits to droop, surely 2 tits would droop.
No, unilateral gyno is like the most. If you want to see, this was literally what provoked this video where this guy's a pretty chill guy, by the way. This was like a really heated video response I did to basically I did my initial video on Adesanya's gyno, and then Brian Sutterer made a video talking about it, and the reason why I responded is because I was getting so much heat in the comment section about how a doctor said that you can't develop gyno on one side and it's impossible, so therefore, a bunch of different fucking excuses for why my explanation made no sense. And then I had to basically fucking went off the handle, dude, in here. And I was like, this doctor's wrong, and explained why you cannot just listen to somebody because they're credentialed. And sometimes it takes further insight. You can't just take what people say at face value, even if it's me, if it's fucking anyone. Like, You know, it's just more people are kind of inclined to listen to somebody who has an MD or somebody who's a PhD or whatever the fuck and be like, yep, what he said is definitely accurate. So it's not always the case. And he actually issued a correction after. I was mistaken about the rarity of unilateral versus bilateral point here, and people should not be blasting this channel in my defense. My explanation was also quite basic, and I learned a thing or two watching this channel. If your doctor can't admit being wrong, they aren't a good doctor. I talked with Derek about this. All is good with us, and I appreciate him helping me learn more. Hope you enjoy / learn from the rest of my video. The reason I bring it up too is because I actually saw in the comments section before filming, some people are linking to those videos and like it's being resurfaced. So I just wanted to clarify, we did hash it out privately, and he did clarify his views on it, because his video fucking exploded. The algorithm loved that one for him, and is why it was such a thing that required addressing. Like, he had this hit the trending page. It got to like number 7 or something, almost 2 million views at this point. And he issued a correction here, and yeah, so unilateral gyno, very, very common, and especially among hormone users, guys who use anabolics. It's like, I know more people who've had asymmetric unilateral gyno than anyone who's had equally like fucking growing tits on high doses of test, D-ball, fucking, you know, the works. So it's definitely common. You know, it's not like some sort of thing that's targeted where you have the specific drugs are going to equate to like equal growth in both sides. Like, it doesn't work like that. I can see why Bisping would speculate so, though, because it's like most things, like even the effects they have in a positive manner on like bone mineral density, hyperplasia, hypertrophy, etc. These are things that occur like symmetrically throughout the body. It's not like one leg responds better to fucking training than the other leg, or your one arm gets better response to curls than the other arm. Like, everything kind of is like even, I guess. But then when you have aromatization to estrogen and downstream cascades that lead to proliferation and actual glandular development, it can be totally asymmetric to a point that you have one nipple that's like entirely unaffected and another one that has a goddamn tit. So he's way off base on this, but I can understand his presumption and why he would think that. But it's simply not the case. It's actually very common among anabolic steroid users. But anyways, he's inclined to believe that Adesanya is clean because he does have he has a spotless record. Like, there's no blemishes on it. There's nothing wrong with it. And he's the guy who's always calling out the fucking gear users, you know? That's one of his main things.
Brian?
Maybe he just lifts weird.
Yeah.
There could be a bunch of, I'm not a doctor. I don't know shit about shit, but he's addressed it before. I think he addressed it with Ariel one time, but he never actually said what it was. He said he'd been to the doctor a couple times and they were trying to figure it out. It is just, I'm with you, Michael. There are guys that I'll accuse outright right away, and I'll stand by that. Adesanya is not one of those guys. He doesn't come off. I mean, you've been in training rooms, you've been around a long time too. You can kind of peg the guys that have the look, or you can just have a feeling. We hear shit all the time.
So can you peg the guys that have the look? Well, you certainly couldn't peg Anderson Silva when he was using draw standalone, or there's certain guys that pop that don't look like they're hormone users, because ultimately some of the stuff and the reason why you would use these compounds is not just for gaining sheer size. Like, hypertrophy is not necessarily a desired outcome by UFC fighters that are straddling weight classes necessarily. They are used for adrenergic signaling, for bone mineral density, there's numerous reasons why you'd use this shit. Hematology, like getting a better oxygen carrying capacity. Like, there's numerous reasons, especially in a calorie deficit when you're cutting for a weight cut, maintaining that heightened hematology profile. There's numerous reasons why it could have high utility in sport. But again, like, if somebody doesn't pass the eye test or the smell test or whatever the fuck, it doesn't really mean anything, because there are guys who have historically popped that didn't look roided out of their fucking mind. But I can understand his assumption here as well. And Adesanya, traditionally, again, a guy who is highly accusatory of other individuals. It would just be odd, for him to be a guy who's doing the shit the entire time too. So anyways, like, why would it fluctuate though? Like, why does it seem to flare up when he's getting into the competitions or whatnot? Like, I don't know how much he weight cuts, to be honest. It's been a while since I've revisited this topic, but in general, Gyno is very temperature sensitive. It's also it's something that doesn't like move necessarily. It could be protruded with fat. So when you are cutting, like a bodybuilder is cutting for a contest, when he gets stage ready lean, he has like no fucking visible body fat on his body entirely, essentially. That's when you're gonna see it the most, because this glandular development does not decrease in size as you're cutting. Maybe if you use a shit ton of estrogen blockers and whatnot while you're cutting to dry out for a show, sure. But anyways, for like a normal person, and even a lot of bodybuilders, the majority of the time when they show up on stage, if they have really bad gyno, it's the most apparent when they're the leanest, because they have no less subcutaneous water, less fat surrounding the glandular mass. So it's way more protruding. You just have this shredded dick skin fucking chest with fucking piano chord, goddamn bookshelf of a chest with striations, super lean. And then you have this weird lump of glandular tissue that does not get smaller and leaner because it's not fat that you can, induce lipolysis and, get rid of it while you're cutting. It's something that remains stagnant, unless you actually oppose the estrogen receptor activation. If you get it cut out, like different things like that, ultimately though, getting leaner is going to make it more obvious. So presumably when Adesanya is in camp and is getting like peaked for a competition, he's getting leaner and better body composition, and this thing becomes more obvious. In addition, when you're taking pictures, when you're warm and in training, the thing is going to fucking pop more. It kind of depends, because like ultimately, if you have really minor gyno, you can actually just like flick your nip or go out in the cold and all of a sudden you can't even tell you have gyno. Whereas if you're in like a really warm bathroom or warm environment where you're training and you're hot, it can be really obvious, For Adesanya though, it's a very, very protruding lump to a point that it's not really easy to hide in all circumstances, where you can just like flick your nip and it goes away. Like obviously flicking your nip here is not going to do a whole lot for you, Being cold, flicking your nip, for like minor cases, it can completely attenuate it temporarily where people can't even tell you have it. And that's what a lot of people do. That's what a lot of fitness models do for photo shoots and whatnot, believe it or not. But for Adesanya, you still see it fluctuate given the temperature changes, the different conditions. It's just how it is. So I think it fluctuates, not necessarily because he's like abusing steroids more during like these contest prep situations, not contest prep, but like actual event, camp scenarios, and then all of a sudden it protrudes more. I think rather it is a existing lump that is going to fluctuate in how apparent it is, more so based on the layer of tissue surrounding it. If there's more subcutaneous water retention, if there is more fat, stuff like that is going to make it more obvious or less obvious in a fluctuating manner depending on what he weighs and what his body composition is. But it's fucking there, and it's been there for, since that fight with Costa. And for years prior to that, he had no, evidence of significant gyno development at all. And he just showed up one day and it was really fucking bad. So it's kind of where we're at with it.
Israel hasn't been one of those guys. Izzy seems like he's a pretty straight shooter. He doesn't have the body of some crazy steroid freak that's just out here, juicing to the gills. So I would never accuse him that. It is weird though that it does tend to happen right before he fights the last couple fights.
Maybe it's like, I don't know what it is. I'm reaching and trying to find something, but I don't know. Build up of the testosterone or whatever. It's something going on, probably a hormonal imbalance of some type. One would assume with again, I'm no doctor and I'm not particularly well read on hormone imbalances in young men as you increase your cardiovascular activity, right? I never suffered with it. But when you look at Adesanya, when you factor in his success as a martial artist and how good he is, right? How precise and how good his kickboxing is and all the rest of it. He's not a guy that needs to be out there taking steroids. Maybe I'm wrong, but he gets a pass from me.
His game's not really built on like crazy power and explosiveness. He's tricky. He's a sniper. He plays a lot of tricks in games. He's not really built on just that one punch knockout power, just punching through shit.
So those Reddit users are idiots. Is the final judgment of the Believe You Me podcast. And by that, so are you, Harrington. Sorry, buddy.
So, is power all you gather from these things? Like, no, of course not. So just because you're a sniper, it doesn't mean you do not gain an advantage. It doesn't mean it doesn't help with motor unit recruitment, with actual skill acquisition, numerous different things, recovery, blah, blah, blah. So again, I would stick with the fluctuating body composition, making it more or less apparent. In addition, when you are cutting, sure, you're going to, lower your testosterone production to some extent, given the lack of substrate for testosterone production from depriving your diet of as much nutrients as you'd otherwise have in the off season, which could lead to a decrease in sex hormone output, which may ultimately decrease the androgenic signaling that is opposing the estrogen-induced proliferative effect on breast tissue development. But again, the gyno's fucking there. I think it fluctuates up and down based on body fat, basically, and that's it, dude. Let me know what you guys think. Who you got? Whitaker versus Adesanya. What do you think? Is he on gear? Is he not on gear? What are your speculations? Let me know in the comments down below. And let me know who you think's going to win. All the comments are much appreciated. Like, subscribe, check out my blog, moreplates.com. Follow me on Instagram, at moreplates.dates, Facebook, Snapchat, Twitter, TikTok, Apple Podcasts. If you want to support the channel, you can check out anything I'm associated with in the video description below. My preventative medicine and hormone replacement therapy platform, where we connect you with doctors that have vetted myself who represent the same quality of information I try to put out on this channel, the most cutting edge literature on endocrinology and hormone optimization, as well as just practical interventions for optimizing your quality of life, vitality, etc. We do things above and beyond the scope of just HRT. We do high quality diagnostics, interpretation of those diagnostics, and educating the patients on what they should be looking for, how to maximize their quality of life, performance, etc., with things outside the scope of just basic testosterone replacement therapy. And that's what we pride ourselves on, is the information we offer and the high quality service, as opposed to just cookie cutter scripts of tests, which is what you get at a lot of other clinics, unfortunately. Here's your test, HCG and Astrazole, get you out the door, onto the next one to make a markup on medications. Not what we're about. So anyways, you can check that out in the video description below, as well as Gorilla Mind nootropic formulas, Gorilla Mode pre-workout formulas. I designed myself from scratch. I recommend a diet model for gaining muscle and sports performance. Clothing company that sponsors me, and I wear pretty much 70% of the time now, I would say. And anything else that's down there that supports me, it's all much appreciated when you guys use my stuff. And I will talk to you guys soon.